He thought it was just a ride home, a polite invitation from two smiling twin girls he'd helped on the side of a dusty Arizona road. But as the sun sank behind the red mesas and the twins exchanged a look that felt older than their years, a quiet truth settled into his chest. Some invitations are not accidents. Some are answers to prayers whispered long before you ever arrive. The moment the twins said, "Our mom would like to meet you," Ethan Cole's life quietly split into a before and an after. He had learned to keep his world small. After leaving the military and drifting through years of short-term jobs, he trusted routines more than people. That afternoon, he was driving a borrowed pickup through Apache country, thinking only about getting to Flagstaff before dark, when he saw two girls waving beside a stalled truck. They were twins, maybe 10 years old, with matching braids and eyes too steady for children. Something in their calm made him pull over. They introduced themselves as Alani and Taza. Their grandmother's truck had died a mile from home. Ethan fixed the loose hose in minutes. When he refused payment, the twins smiled in that knowing way again. "Then you should come home," Alani said. "Our mom will want to thank you." Ethan hesitated. He had learned that stepping into other people's lives often meant stepping into pain. But the land around them felt still, expectant. Against his better judgment, he followed them down a dirt road that wound toward a modest home framed by cottonwood trees and prayer flags moving gently in the breeze. Their mother, Lena Yazzie, stood on the porch when they arrived. She was younger than Ethan expected, her strength quiet, her eyes carrying both warmth and old sorrow. She thanked him simply, with a sincerity that disarmed him. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into stories. The twins watched everything closely, like guardians of a plan Ethan didn't yet understand. Over the meal, Ethan learned Lena was widowed. Her husband, Daniel, had died 3 years earlier in an accident at the sawmill. Since then, she had raised the twins, cared for her aging mother, and carried her grief with dignity. Ethan spoke little about himself, but Lena listened as if every word mattered. As night settled, the twins whispered to each other, smiling. When Ethan finally stood to leave, Lena surprised herself by asking him to stay the night. The road wasn't safe after dark, she said, but the truth was deeper. Something about Ethan felt familiar, like a piece that had been missing but unnamed. That night, Ethan lay awake on the couch, listening to the house breathe. He felt it, the strange pull of belonging. And in the next room, the twins whispered a promise to each other. "He's kind. He's ready." Over the next weeks, Ethan found reasons to return. He helped fix fences, drove Lena's mother to appointments, and shared meals that felt less like visits and more like coming home. The twins orchestrated everything, placing him beside their mother at dinner, inventing reasons for them to work together, watching with solemn approval. One evening, as rain tapped the roof, Taza spoke what Ethan hadn't dared to imagine. "We think you should marry our mom." The room went silent. Ethan laughed at first, then stopped when he saw their serious faces and Lena's sudden tears. She apologized, embarrassed, explaining that in their culture, children sometimes saw truths adults were too afraid to name. She hadn't planned anything. She wasn't ready. Ethan left that night shaken. The idea terrified him, not because he didn't care, but because he did. He carried his own scars, his own fear of failing a family again. For days, he stayed away. It was Lena who finally came to him, standing outside his trailer as dawn broke. She spoke of grief that doesn't end, only changes shape, of love that honors the past without being trapped by it. Ethan listened, heart bare. He admitted his fear, that he might not be enough, that he might leave. Lena answered softly, "Staying is a choice we make every day." Months passed. Healing is never rushed. Slowly, trust replaced fear. The twins watched, patient and wise beyond their years. When Ethan finally asked Lena if she would consider a future together, it wasn't a grand gesture, just two people choosing courage. The wedding was small, held beneath the open sky. The twins stood between them, hands linked, grinning like they'd always known how the story would end. Ethan realized then that he hadn't been invited home by chance. He had been called into love, into family, into a life that asked him not to be perfect, but present. Marriage didn't magically erase the past. Ethan learned quickly that loving Lena also meant honoring Daniel's memory. His photos still hung on the wall. His tools rested untouched in the shed. At first, Ethan felt like a guest in another man's life. Some nights he lay awake wondering if he was intruding on something sacred. The twins struggled too. Alani clung to Ethan easily, asking endless questions, following him everywhere. Taza, quieter and more guarded, watched him with careful eyes, as if waiting for proof he wouldn't disappear like death had taken her father. When Ethan raised his voice once, just once, during a moment of stress, Taza didn't cry. She simply went silent for days. That silence hurt more than anger. Lena felt torn between gratitude and guilt. Happiness scared her. She worried that joy might betray her late husband's memory. During a ceremony led by an elder, she finally spoke her truth aloud, releasing tears she had held for years. She learned that love doesn't replace, it expands. Slowly, the house changed. Laughter returned. New routines formed. Ethan learned Apache traditions, stories passed by firelight, lessons about patience and responsibility. The twins began calling him stepdad, then simply dad, as if the word had been waiting for him all along. Just when peace felt real, a single letter threatened to unravel everything they had built. It arrived one afternoon, addressed to Lena. It was from Daniel's brother, a man who believed Ethan had no place in the family. He accused Lena of forgetting, of letting a stranger take what wasn't his. Old doubts surged back like a storm. Ethan offered to leave, not out of anger, but love. He didn't want to be the reason Lena felt torn. That night, the twins overheard the conversation. For the first time, they cried openly. Alani begged him to stay. Taza finally spoke the fear she had carried for years. Everyone leaves. The next day, Lena stood firm. She invited Daniel's brother to visit. She spoke with strength, explaining that honoring the dead did not mean denying the living. When he saw the home filled with warmth, the twins laughing, Ethan repairing what Daniel once had, something softened. He didn't apologize, but he stopped fighting. The storm passed. What remained was stronger than before. Ethan thought he was rescuing a family, but the truth was they were saving him. He found steady work nearby, mentoring young men who reminded him of himself, lost, guarded, searching. He taught them skills, but more importantly, presence. At home, he showed up every day, even when it was hard. When Taza performed her first traditional dance, she looked for Ethan in the crowd. When Alani struggled in school, he sat beside her every night until she believed in herself again. These moments rewrote Ethan's understanding of purpose. Lena watched him grow into fatherhood with quiet pride. She realized love wasn't loud declarations, it was constancy. Years later, on a warm evening, the family gathered around a fire. The twins, now teenagers, teased Ethan gently. Alani laughed and said, "We told you from the beginning. You were supposed to come home." Ethan smiled, emotion catching in his throat. He finally understood. The invitation on that dusty road wasn't coincidence. It was alignment. Healing meeting readiness. Love meeting courage. He looked at Lena, at the girls, at the land that had claimed him as its own. For the first time in his life, he felt whole. Some families are born. Others are chosen. And sometimes, the ones who guide us home are the ones we least expect. If you ever feel lost, remember this. Love has a way of finding you when you're brave enough to stop running. All it asks is that when the invitation comes, you say yes.